What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with the box office breakdown for Sunday, October 13th, where for the first time since I started tackling box office on this channel, I'm actually doing two box office reports on the same weekend because the story's that interesting, and also we finally have the final numbers, the final tally in this battle of the killer clowns. And just to illustrate how remarkable these numbers are, let me wind the clock back 4 days to when Rebecca Rubin over at Variety, she was predicting that Joker Folie à Deux might be headed toward a brutal 65% drop and that Terrifier might have an exceptional weekend of $10 million. But here we are, Sunday, October 13th. Not only did Terrifier top the box office with $18 million, Joker Folie à Deux dropped 81%. This is in a lot of ways kind of a historic weekend when it comes to comparing big budget franchise filmmaking versus low budget franchise filmmaking. There's so much to infer from this story about the prospects of the library of DC characters over at Warner Brothers, the uphill battle that James Gunn is going to have to endure next year with his Superman movie. But also for me, it's very exciting because 2024 is turning into a pretty goddamn good year just for horror movies. I was joking yesterday on Twitter how at the end of the year, if you wanted to do a top 10 list for the year just within the horror genre, like I'm not going to say they're all going to be bangers, but you could actually put together a pretty good list of good horror movies and some less good horror movies, but you would have a top 10 list. I can't remember the last time that happened, but Terrifier 3 is that rare low-budget movie that's actually a low-budget genre film that delivers the goods, that people are having a good time watching, whereas Joker Folie à Deux, less so. But before I go any further, if you're a subscriber to this channel and you're not in the mood to hear this bald-headed idiot talk about the same subject for the second day in a row, I'm going to direct everybody to my David Cronenberg video I recently made where I rank every single movie in his filmography. It's an hour and a half long. It's nothing but horror and perversion and all that good stuff. So if you want to hear just like some good old-fashioned movie talk, I'll leave a link to that David Cronenberg video in the description below. But let's get back to Terrifier 3 versus Joker Folie à Deux. Whether it was planned for or intended or not, this is a classic David murdering Goliath scenario or a triumph of the underdog scenario. And I think this time next year, Joker Folie à Deux is going to be looked back upon as like an object of ridicule or an object of scorn. The same way like The Crow, the remake of The Crow, not the original, but the recent remake of The Crow with Skarsgård, as well as The Flash, The Marvels, Madam Web, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, Blue Beetle, Wonder Woman 1984, Echo, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, or any other doomed superhero project from the last few years that either bombed outright or was met with widespread ridicule. But as far as like the cold hard data is concerned, Joker Folie à Deux is surpassing all of them in terms of the second weekend drop. 81% is unheard of, and I just feel like the bulletproof genre of superheroes from the previous decade, that is so fucking over. And I feel like there will always be superhero shows and there will always be superhero movies, but quality matters more than ever. Who's directing? Who's writing? Who's starring? Like The Penguin right now, people are loving that show over on HBO. Like the DC brand is alive and well when the filmmaker really delivers. Or look at Deadpool and Wolverine over at Marvel. That movie grossed over $1 billion. Like it put the rest of the recent Marvel crop of movies to shame. But as Deadpool himself said in that movie to Wolverine, you're coming in at a bit of a low point. Like everybody knows the superhero genre is challenged, and yet people keep making these fucked up movies. And so some executive or some suit or somebody in a position of power at DC should have said, maybe calling it Joker Folie à Deux is a mistake. Maybe having Joker repent and become Arthur Fleck again is a mistake. Maybe making it a musical is a mistake. Maybe Batman should show up at some point. Like there's so many things that are obvious in hindsight, but when a director creates a $1 billion hit from nothing or out of nowhere, they do get, well, sometimes they'll get given a lot of rope with which to hang themselves. And that's exactly what Todd Phillips did. And I'm hearing that at one point they were taking story ideas from Joaquin Phoenix, who was basing story ideas from his dreams. Like, I'm sorry, being a brilliant actor does not mean that you are also a brilliant screenwriter. Those individuals are incredibly rare. They exist. There's some good actor-directors. There's some good actor-writer-directors. Like some people are just a jack of all trades where they can kind of bring a bunch of different skills to the table. But Joaquin Phoenix has no history as a screenwriter. He should show up and read his lines and hit his marks and bring all that insanity to the table, but let the screenwriters do the writing. And I've heard other people say that being an intelligent actor doesn't necessarily make you a better actor. There are plenty of dumb actors who are brilliant actors, and there are plenty of smart actors who are terrible actors. But at a certain point, you have to just have the courage to say, like we'll take your idea under consideration, but maybe we should be using other source material apart from your dreams to make the sequel to this massive hit movie that people are very excited to see. And what's crazy now is how if you take just the last like 2 or 3 years and look at all the superhero movies from Sony, from Disney, from Warner Brothers, and line them all up, the superhero genre is much more likely to fail than it is to succeed. Like just on the agenda over the next year, we have Kraven the Hunter coming in December. That's probably going to bomb. It'll probably be another Madam Web, maybe not as humiliating as Joker, but Marvel has 3 movies next year. I don't know if any of them will be as successful as Deadpool and Wolverine. And of course, James Gunn has Superman, but it's like, of those movies, I would guess that Superman will probably be the most successful, unless Fantastic Four, whatever it's called, like First Year or New Beginnings. Anyway, I can't remember what they're calling the new Fantastic Four movie, but like they've already made like 5 of them, and none of them have worked. So it's like, even if they do an amazing job, maybe that movie won't resonate. But I just feel like at this point, that the golden age of the superhero movie is totally over, and I have a feeling, in hindsight, I don't know what the turning point might have been. Maybe it was Avengers Endgame, where like we kind of like the wave peaked or the wave crested and pulled back. But I have a feeling the superhero genre is headed toward like the same terrain as like the musical or the Western. Hollywood in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, you had a lot of musicals and a lot of Westerns, and people ate them up. They loved them, but nothing lasts forever. And it's clear now in hindsight that it was a bad idea for Hollywood to put all their eggs in a superhero-shaped basket, as they say over on the show The Ankler. And we can blame a variety of factors, but as somebody who read comic books for decades, I saw DC and Marvel have good periods, bad periods. I saw comebacks, I saw downfalls, and it all boils down to, like, can you give us something fresh and something new? And Terrifier 3 is absolutely something fresh and new. It's not a superhero movie, but you are still dealing with a killer clown. The movie has just attitude and has swagger and has gore and it has, thrills without any redeeming social message of any kind. Sometimes people just want to go to the proverbial red light district and have an evening of sin without having to think about any sort of like redeeming social message. And last night I had this thunderous idea that came to me as I was watching the documentary series on Netflix, Mr. McMahon. And I know very little about wrestling history, but one of the most interesting episodes to me was episode 4, where they talk about the Attitude Era for WWF. Like WWF in the 90s was starting to struggle, the audience was declining, the product was subpar, but then they brought in the Attitude Era, which consisted of a lot of, let's just say, adult humor, adult sexuality. Like instead of marketing the wrestling product to like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old boy sensibility, suddenly they were going after that 18 to 34 demographic. And I think the superhero genre and or horror movies are ready for an Attitude Era, or the equivalent of an Attitude Era. And the fact that Terrifier 3 has performed so far and above expectations shows that there's actually a decent audience that wants unrated content. You can actually build a business around it. And as far as movies go, like in the 21st century, we've seen the dominance of a lot of family-friendly franchises, whether that's Marvel or DC or Harry Potter. But maybe there are people out there that are ready for an Attitude Era in movies, like unrated comedies that really go for the jugular, or unrated erotic thrillers that really provide like some real sizzle. I think if you were to keep the budgets low and find the right filmmakers that could lean into that sensibility, that no-holds-barred sensibility, you might actually have more Terrifier 3s lighting up the charts, lighting up the box office. And the fact that Terrifier 3 is performing so well after Longlegs made such a huge splash this past summer, it's very encouraging. It makes me very optimistic, makes me very long about the horror genre. Like Longlegs had a $10 million budget and a $10 million marketing spend, which definitely helped propel it to those $100 million highs. And also the social media marketing campaign for the movie was just fucking brilliant, or at least it was over on Twitter, aka X. But also, I'm finding good horror entertainment in kind of like other mediums as well. I recently started reading Empire the Vampire, which I'm absolutely loving. Brand new book. The sequel to it just came out this past spring, but it's basically vampires and medieval holy warriors and empires clashing, and it's like, dark adult fantasy with generous quantities of sex and murder and mayhem, and it's just fucking fun as hell to read. And there's nothing like it going on in the world of film and television right now. Like, I don't even want any filmmakers out there to go anywhere near that series, because I feel like there's probably a very short list of like filmmakers that I can count on one hand that I would trust with that kind of material without trying to quite literally defang it. And when you're dealing with a story about horror and vampires, you don't want to defang it. You want to get those fangs as mean and nasty as humanly possible. And that's precisely what Terrifier 3 did. Like, does it have its flaws? Sure, there's some clumsy acting in it. It's actually kind of slow at times, But when it's time to deliver, when Art the Clown is, pointing and making all these expressions before he's doing horrible things to people, it's hilarious and revolting all at the same time. And in the end, that's what people are paying for when they go to the movies. They want emotion and they want a good fucking time. In any case, I think I've ranted enough at this point. Let's head over to Rebecca Rubin's article over in Variety for the Real Deal analysis with her article titled Terrifier 3 tops box office with 18 million debut. Joker Folie collapses with brutal 81% drop. There's only room for one killer clown at the top of the box office charts. Terrifier 3 slashed its way to number one in North America, collecting a stellar $18.3 million from 2,514 theaters in its opening weekend. It's a huge start for the ultra-gory, independently made, low-budget slasher film about a demonic clown who brutalizes a small town. And let me add to what she just said, unrated. Like, I can remember in the 90s, if you had an unrated movie or an NC-17 movie, oftentimes like Blockbuster wouldn't even put that movie on their shelves, or certain movie chains wouldn't even allow those movies to be projected. But we're living in a brand new landscape. Theaters like AMC and Regal, they need the business. I think the door is now open for as many unrated movies as people care to make. Meanwhile, Joker Folie à Deux, which topped the box office last weekend, collapsed in third place with $7.055 million from 4,102 theaters. It could end up in fourth place behind holdover Beetlejuice once the final numbers are tallied on Monday. The offbeat comic book musical starring Joaquin Phoenix as a reclusive stand-up comedian and part-time clown suffered a tragic 82% decline in ticket sales from its already disastrous $37.6 million debut. Holy shit, Rebecca Rubin is pulling no punches, but that's why I like reading Rebecca Rubin's articles. It ranks as one of the biggest second weekend drops for the superhero genre, plunging more severely than last year's misfires of The Marvels, 78.1%, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, 69.9%, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, 69%, and The Flash, 72.5%. The Warner Brothers film carries a hefty $200 million price tag, and at this rate will struggle to get anywhere near the $450 million needed to break even, according to sources familiar with the financials. And let's just pause for a second and digest the enormity of what she just shared, where The Marvels, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, The Flash, and now Joker Folie à Deux are all suffering those horrible second weekend drops. The golden age is over. The genre is no longer bulletproof. Unless you make a really good fucking show or a really good fucking movie, I'm sorry, you're going down in flames. Like people aren't just clapping seals, like mindlessly, like walking towards the cliff like a herd of lemmings, like willing to watch whatever. I think Hollywood got really complacent, and I think it shows how disdainful they always were toward the superhero genre. Like, oh, like these nerds, these dorks, they'll watch anything. We can put anybody in anything and assign anybody to direct them. But if you look at the early days of like the superhero craze and what really got it going, you had filmmakers like Sam Raimi making Spider-Man, or Bryan Singer making X-Men, or like in the decade to come, whether it was Christopher Nolan or Jon Favreau or James Gunn or the Russo brothers or Joss Whedon, like these are big-time filmmakers. You can't just hand these assignments to any old schlub. You got to get real deal directors with a real compelling vision for the material. And best of all, if you can find a director like James Gunn, who spent many, many years obsessing over comics, that's when you get a real, gritty, authentic superhero movie. And that's why I'm hoping that Superman will really deliver next year. But back to Rubin, Terrifier 3 has surprisingly positive critical and audience reactions for such an unsettling movie, scoring a B on CinemaScore and 77% on Rotten Tomatoes. The blood-soaked threequel, which doesn't have a rating by the Motion Picture Association, has been stoking controversy for violence, with the distributors at Cineverse launching a hotline for moviegoers to complain about the carnage. The third Terrifier installment has already surpassed the entire global haul of its predecessor, 2022's Terrifier 2. That film defied the odds and similarly dared moviegoers to not vomit by earning $10 million domestically and $15.7 million globally, a scary good result for the micro-budget production. The third movie, again directed by Damien Leone, features the sadistic Art the Clown, who usually strikes around Halloween, but this time decided to wait until Christmas to unleash his terror. And I don't think it's too early to start talking about Terrifier 3 as one of the great Halloween/Christmas hybrid movies. There are not a lot of hybrid movies like that. But I feel like The Nightmare Before Christmas, when that came out, I think I was a junior in high school. I believe that came out in November, but it was like a perfect hybrid Halloween/Christmas movie. Not slasher. Terrifier 3, along those lines, maybe like the most entertaining scene I've seen all year in any movie is when Art the Clown interacts with Santa Claus and is pretending to be a massive fan, or maybe, who knows, maybe he actually is a legitimate fan. It is absolutely fucking hilarious, and I strongly recommend everybody who doesn't mind a little gore definitely check out Terrifier 3. But getting back to the article, this is an outstanding opening for a third episode in an indie horror series, says analyst David A. Gross of movie consulting firm Franchise Entertainment Research. The series is not on the level of studio horror pictures, those are bigger movies, but it's a great payoff. And also, let me interrupt again, as far as those studio movies are concerned, take any horror movie by Blumhouse. There's a 99% chance that it's going to absolutely suck balls. Give me Terrifier 3 over anything being made over at Blumhouse these days. But rants over, back to the article. Fellow newcomer Piece by Piece, a documentary that tells the story of Pharrell Williams using Lego animation, fell short of expectations, opening in 6th place with $3.8 million from 1,865 locations. Focus Features is releasing the $16 million budgeted film, which landed a promising A grade on CinemaScore and holds an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes. Morgan Neville, whose bona fides include the acclaimed Mr. Rogers doc, Won't You Be My Neighbor, as well as 20 Feet from Stardom, directed the doc. Yeah, I probably should have gone to the theater to see Piece by Piece because I did like the movie Won't You Be My Neighbor by the same filmmaker, but going to the theater to see a documentary can be a bit of a tough sell. I mean, last night I spent like 5 hours watching a documentary on Netflix about Mr. McMahon, and I strongly recommend people check that out. It is fucking bananas. But unless you're a documentary filmmaker on the level of my dear friend Jeremy Workman, whose new movie Secret Mall Apartment will absolutely blow your goddamn mind, you won't find me going to the theater frequently to see documentaries. But before I move on, I just wanted to go back to one idea related to Terrifier 3. And it's always interesting seeing Hollywood get confounded by somebody making a movie for a much smaller scale. Like, I would love to see a line-by-line budget of one of those big, bloated $400 million Marvel movies. Like, if you're spending a lot of money on above-the-line costs, actors, directors, producers, and they're delivering a hit, totally worth it. But I feel like those giant productions, they attract parasites like ticks, where they just start bleeding those projects dry, where it's like they can't even move or do anything or reschedule anything without the cost ballooning wildly out of control. I imagine if you were to look at the budget for Terrifier 3, you probably wouldn't get permission to buy a fucking pencil unless Damien Leone was like write it in blood. Like, we don't have the money for you to buy the pencil. Like, I'm so sorry. I feel like Hollywood needs to bring in some of the bean counters and start bringing those budgets back down to earth. But as the article says, musical bios and Lego each have a strong track record on the big screen. This hybrid is not on the level of those individual genres, says Gross. However, he adds the cost was reasonable. The movie's going to play well in ancillary markets and become profitable there. Sony's Saturday Night struggled to break through to mainstream audiences after 2 weekends in limited release. The Highwire look at the inaugural broadcast of Saturday Night Live landed at number 7 with a muted $3.4 million from 2,300 theaters over the weekend. The film, directed by Jason Reitman, cost $30 million and will need to show endurance and garner some awards attention to turn a profit. Now, I've been seeing some good reviews for Saturday Night out there, but I have a tough time spending money and going to the theater to see actors in their 20s impersonating comedy legends from the 1970s, like Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase and Bill Murray and John Belushi and Gilda Radner. Like, they were all legends, and you just can't. Like, I imagine some of them, once again, sight unseen, I imagine some of the performances come across as caricature as opposed to characters. I'd rather just watch old SNL clips or entire episodes or watch a great documentary about that period. Also, I just don't like filmmaker Jason Reitman, or I haven't liked Jason Reitman's recent movies. But here's another sad reality. Movies about show business oftentimes struggle. Not always, but sometimes if you're making a movie about making movies or making a movie about making television, it is an uphill climb. Exceptions would be something like Network, Sidney Lumet's film from the 1970s, one of the greatest movies ever made. It's an absolutely riveting movie. You can watch it 50 to 100 times and get something new out of it each and every single time. Whether or not Jason Reitman can equal Sidney Lumet, well, it's not even a question. I know he can't. But yeah, check out Network, Saturday Night. I guess, what is the role for movies like that these days? Like, do movies like that just belong on HBO and Netflix and Amazon? Or is there an audience that still wants to go see movies like that? I don't know, but I feel like unless you're going to just like deliver solid gold, like above and beyond expectations, those kinds of movies are going to struggle in the modern day marketplace. Another new release, The Apprentice, crumbled in 11th place with $1.58 million from 1,740 venues. The biographical drama in which Sebastian Stan portrays a young Donald Trump premiered at the Cannes Film Festival and struggled to find a buyer until Briarcliff Entertainment acquired the rights. Reviewers and audiences were mixed on the movie, which earned a B- cinema score and 77% on Rotten Tomatoes. One prominent critic has been Trump himself, who has threatened legal action over the movie. His team issued a statement over the summer saying, "This garbage is pure fiction which sensationalizes lies that have been long debunked." I don't know why I'm laughing, but it's hard not to read that statement by his team and not think about his voice saying that. But yeah, I did not see The Apprentice, so I have no strong opinion one way or another. Elsewhere at the domestic box office, Universal and DreamWorks Animation's The Wild Robot soared in second place with $13.45 million in its third weekend of release. The well-reviewed family film has amassed $83.7 million domestically and $148 million globally to date. And I think I saw online that it's already been the sequel's already gotten the green light. And also that movie only cost like $78 million to make. So yeah, Wild Robot, I totally get it. But one final paragraph, Beetlejuice, and Transformers 1 rounded out the top 5. The former, a sequel to Tim Burton's 1988 comedy horror favorite, took third place with $7.050 million in its sixth weekend on the big screen. The Beetlejuice sequel has grossed $275 million in North America. The latter, an origin story about Optimus Prime and Megatron, secured the number 5 spot over several newcomers with $3.65 million in its fourth outing. It has earned $52.8 million domestically and $111 million worldwide so far. So there it is. That's all the news that's fit to print. But just to circle back to a point I was making earlier about 2024 being a good year for the horror genre, we're not completely finished with the horror genre quite yet. We still have Heretic with Hugh Grant coming out, which looks like it has some interesting possibilities. We have Smile 2 coming out. We've got fucking Nosferatu coming in December. So I love doing top 10 lists at the end of every year, but I think within my top 10 list, I'm definitely, just for the sake of, just out of curiosity, I am going to create like a secondary list just within the horror genre. I imagine that at least the top 5 will be pretty goddamn solid, and that the rest will be just fine. And there might even be a few honorable mentions. So if you love the horror genre, you love spooky movies, scary movies, all that good stuff, just enjoy it, because for whatever reason, this is just turning out to be one of those years. And it's got me wondering, if you were to look back at history, what would be considered the best year for horror movies ever? Like, without even looking at a list, I would just assume 1971, because 1971 is my favorite year of filmmaking ever. But I'm gonna have to do some soul searching. What is the undisputed greatest year? Like, when you talk about fantasy and science fiction, 1982 is a clear frontrunner, where you've got Conan the Barbarian and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan and Poltergeist and E.T. and Tron, and what else came out that year? Fucking Blade Runner and The Thing. I mean, 1982 is just insane. So it's like, but with what is the equivalent of 1982 for the horror genre? To be continued on that subject in a later video. I'm going to write that down as soon as I wrap this up. So, hope y'all enjoyed this commentary. Definitely check out Terrifier 3 if you have not seen it yet. Let's drive those numbers even higher. But hope everybody has a great week. But if you enjoyed this video, like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.